Something was said in a conversation your soulmate never expected to affect them, and the strange part is that nobody was even talking about you. The subject was second chances. Someone mentioned people finding their way back to each other after years apart. Someone else talked about unfinished connections, and for a moment your soulmate was simply listening. Then your memory appeared, not gradually, not because they were deliberately searching for you. You came into their mind almost instantly, and suddenly the conversation felt much more personal than it had a few seconds earlier. They may have remembered your voice, the way you looked at them during a certain moment, something you once said, or even the last conversation between you that they thought they had already made peace with. But this time, they were hearing those memories through a different lens. The words second chance made them wonder whether every meaningful connection is truly finished when two people stop speaking. They may have started asking themselves a question they have avoided for a long time. What if your story was not completely over, but simply interrupted by timing, circumstances, fear, misunderstanding, or two people who were not ready to handle what they felt? And that question can be difficult to silence once it appears, because your soulmate may have believed they had already accepted what happened between you. They may have continued with their life, convinced that the past belonged where it was. But one ordinary conversation has suddenly reopened a door in their thoughts. If this ministry has helped you through moments of uncertainty, reflection, or emotional growth, and you genuinely feel led to support the work, there is a donation link in the description and pinned comment. Your contribution helps us continue creating these messages for people who may need encouragement at exactly the right moment. Please give only what you can comfortably afford, and if you cannot donate, that is completely okay. Your like, subscription, comment, and sharing this message with someone who needs it a meaningful support too. Because your soulmate did not hear a promise that you were coming back. They heard something much more powerful, the possibility that some connections deserve to be understood again before they are completely released. Now that the thought has entered their mind, your soulmate may be doing something they never intended to do, revisiting what actually happened between you. Not just the beautiful memories, not just the moments that made the connection feel special, but the entire story. They may be looking at the ending differently now. At the time, perhaps they believed the distance was necessary. Maybe they thought the timing was wrong, or that too many things stood between you, or that walking away was the only practical choice. But hearing someone talk about second chances may have made them realize that an ending and a true ending are not always the same thing. Sometimes people stop speaking because circumstances become too complicated. Sometimes pride prevents a conversation that should have happened. Sometimes fear makes people protect themselves from something they actually wanted. And sometimes two people care about each other, but simply do not possess the emotional maturity to handle the connection at that particular point in their lives. Your soulmate may now be wondering whether that was what happened between you. They may be replaying certain conversations and noticing details they ignored before. Perhaps they remember a moment when you were trying to express something, but they misunderstood it. Maybe they remember pulling away when they should have stayed. Maybe they remember you becoming quiet and assuming you no longer cared, when perhaps you were simply tired of trying to explain what you felt. Distance has a strange ability to change perspective. When you are inside an emotional situation, everything feels immediate. Every disagreement feels bigger. Every silence feels final. Every decision seems like it has to be made immediately. But time creates space, and space allows people to see what they could not see while they were emotionally involved. Your soulmate may now have enough distance to recognize that some of the things they considered impossible were actually problems that might have been handled differently. That does not mean they are rewriting history or pretending nothing painful happened. It means they are finally allowing themselves to consider another interpretation. Perhaps the connection did not disappear because the feelings were meaningless. Perhaps the connection became impossible because both of you were dealing with things you did not know how to handle. And that realization can be uncomfortable because it removes the simplicity of saying it just wasn't meant to be. They may have used that sentence because it helped them move forward. But now they are wondering whether it was actually true or simply easier to believe. They may think about what you needed from them back then, what they were unable to give, and whether they would respond differently today. They may remember your patience and realize they did not appreciate it. They may remember your silence and realize there were things you were communicating without words. They may remember the moments when you tried to keep the connection alive and wonder whether they recognized the effort at the time. And perhaps they are also thinking about their own behavior. What did they avoid? What did they leave unsaid? What did they assume instead of asking? These questions can become surprisingly emotional because they are not questions about changing the past. They are questions about understanding it. And that is exactly what the conversation about second chances may have triggered. Your soulmate may not yet know whether they want another opportunity. They may not even know whether one would be possible. But they are beginning to understand that the connection meant enough to them that the idea of another chance does not feel ridiculous anymore. It feels possible enough to think about. And once someone starts asking what they would do differently, they are no longer simply remembering the past. They are quietly imagining another version of the future. And once your soulmate began looking at the past differently, another thought may have quietly followed. If they ever had another opportunity, what would they do differently? This is where the conversation about second chances becomes much more personal, because they are no longer simply remembering you. They are imagining themselves standing in front of you again, but this time carrying everything they have learned since the last time you spoke. They may wonder whether they would finally say the things they kept inside, whether they would explain the feelings they could not express before, or whether they would approach the connection with more patience instead of allowing fear to make the decisions for them. Perhaps they now recognize moments when they reacted too quickly, withdrew when they should have communicated, or assumed they understood you without actually asking what was happening inside you. Distance has a way of exposing those mistakes because there is no longer an immediate emotional situation distracting them. They can look backward and see patterns that were almost invisible before. And your soulmate may be realizing that the person they were during your connection was not necessarily the best version of themselves. They may have cared deeply, but caring and knowing how to handle something meaningful are not always the same thing. Sometimes people lose something valuable, not because they did not feel enough, but because they did not know what to do with what they felt. That realization can create a very specific kind of regret. Not simply, I miss them, but if I understood then what I understand now, would I have made different choices? They may be thinking about the moments when you needed reassurance and they offered distance, the moments when you needed honesty and they stayed quiet, or the moments when they allowed pride to speak louder than their feelings. They may even wonder whether you saw their behavior as a lack of love, when underneath it there was actually fear, confusion, or emotional immaturity. But there is another side to this reflection. Your soulmate may also be asking what they would want from a second chance. Would they simply want to recreate the old connection? Or would they want to build something completely different? Because deep down, they may understand that going backward would not solve anything. The old version of both of you created the old outcome. If anything were ever given another opportunity, it would require two people who have learned something from what happened. If this ministry has helped you reflect on your own journey, and these messages have brought you comfort during moments when you needed perspective, there is a donation link in the description and pinned comment for anyone who genuinely feels led to support our work. Your generosity helps us continue creating these messages and reaching people who may be quietly carrying questions of their own. Please give only what you can comfortably afford. If you cannot donate, there is absolutely no pressure. Your support through subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this message with someone who may need it is already valuable. Now your soulmate may be imagining what a conversation between you would sound like today. They may wonder whether you would be angry, indifferent, forgiving, or simply different. They may wonder whether you would even recognize the person they have become. Because they know time has changed you, but they also know it has changed them. Perhaps they have developed more patience. Perhaps they have learned to communicate instead of disappearing. Perhaps they have experienced situations that taught them what your presence actually meant. And maybe that is why the idea of a second chance feels so complicated. They are not only imagining another opportunity with you, they are imagining another opportunity to become the person they wish they had been when you were together. But there is one thing they cannot control, and that is your response. They can imagine what they would say. They can imagine what they would change. They can imagine how different things might feel. But they cannot decide whether you would still want to open that door. And as that realization settles in, their curiosity may slowly become something more vulnerable. They may begin wondering whether you have already moved forward so completely that there is no longer a place for them in your life. And that may be the question that keeps them thinking about your connection long after the conversation about second chances has ended. And now the thought may be turning back toward you, because your soulmate is beginning to understand that wanting a second chance and actually being given one are two completely different things. They can imagine another conversation. They can replay the moments they wish they had handled differently. They can think about what they would say if you were standing in front of them again. But there is one question they cannot answer for themselves. Would you even want to hear them? That uncertainty may be making them think about your current life more than they expected. They may wonder whether you have moved on emotionally, whether you still remember the connection with the same tenderness, or whether time has changed your feelings completely. They may wonder if you would recognize the person they have become, just as they are beginning to realize they may not recognize the person you have become. Because while they have been thinking about the past, your life has continued forward. You have had your own experiences, your own lessons, your own moments of growth, and your own reasons for becoming more careful about who receives access to your heart. Your soulmate may now understand that they cannot simply return expecting everything to feel exactly as it did before. The old version of you may have waited for explanations, but the current version of you may value peace more than answers. The old version may have accepted uncertainty for longer, while the current version may have stronger boundaries. And this possibility can make your soulmate hesitant. They may be afraid that the opportunity they are imagining exists only in their mind. They may wonder whether you would see their desire for another chance as sincere or simply as nostalgia. They may even question whether you still have any emotional space for the connection at all. And that is where the idea of a second chance becomes much more serious. It is easy to romanticize the past when nobody has to face the consequences. It is easy to imagine a beautiful reunion when you are only thinking about the good moments. But if another conversation ever happened, both of you would have to acknowledge what actually happened. There would be things that needed to be understood. Perhaps apologies that needed to be offered, and patterns that could not be repeated. Your soulmate may be realizing that they cannot simply say, "I miss you," and expect the past to disappear. Missing someone is a feeling. Rebuilding trust is a process. And if they truly want another opportunity, they may need to approach you with honesty rather than expectation. They may need to accept that you have the right to say no. They may need to understand that your growth changed what you require from a connection. And perhaps that is why this conversation about second chances has stayed with them. It forced them to realize that you are not simply a memory waiting to be revisited. You are a person with a present, a life, boundaries, and choices of your own. They may be wondering whether they still belong anywhere in that life. And the truth is, they do not know. You do not know either. But uncertainty can be meaningful because it leaves room for reality instead of fantasy. Maybe a conversation will happen one day. Maybe it will not. What matters right now is that your soulmate is beginning to understand the difference between wanting another chance and being ready for one. If this message has helped you reflect on your own experiences and you genuinely feel led to support this ministry, there is a donation link in the description and pinned comment. Your support helps us continue creating messages that offer encouragement and perspective to people navigating complicated emotional seasons. Please give only what you can comfortably afford, and if donating is not possible, there is no pressure at all. A like, subscription, comment or share can help this message reach someone who may need it. And perhaps your soulmate is now sitting with the possibility that if your paths ever cross again, they would not be meeting the same person they once knew. They would be meeting someone who has grown, learned, and developed a clearer understanding of what they deserve. That realization may make them nervous, but it may also make them more honest with themselves. Because if they ever do approach you again, they will know that nostalgia will not be enough. They will need to bring something real. They will need to show through their actions that they understand what they did not understand before. And somewhere inside them, they may finally be asking the most important question of all. If I were given another chance, would I be prepared to handle it differently this time? And perhaps this is where the meaning of that conversation about second chances finally becomes clear. Because your soulmate is no longer simply thinking about what happened between you. They are thinking about what could happen if two people who have changed were ever given the opportunity to speak again. They may be realizing that a second chance would not mean returning to the exact place where everything stopped. It would mean meeting each other from completely different positions, with more understanding, more honesty, and hopefully fewer fears controlling the connection. They may remember who you were when they knew you before, but now they are beginning to understand that you have lived an entire chapter without them. You have grown in ways they cannot fully measure. You have learned what you will accept, what you will no longer tolerate, what kind of communication you need, and what peace means to you now. And perhaps that is what makes the possibility feel both beautiful and frightening to them. They cannot simply expect the old door to open because they suddenly feel ready. They would have to approach the person standing on the other side of that door today. They may be asking themselves whether they are prepared for that, whether they could be honest enough, whether they could finally communicate what they once kept hidden, whether they could take responsibility without trying to defend every mistake. And maybe most importantly, whether they could accept whatever answer you gave them, because a genuine second chance cannot be built on entitlement. It cannot begin with the assumption that history automatically gives someone access to your present. It has to begin with respect. Your soulmate may be realizing this now, and that realization could be changing the way they think about you. Instead of simply remembering the connection with nostalgia, they may be seeing its value with greater maturity. They may understand that some relationships do not become meaningful because they last forever. Sometimes they become meaningful because they reveal something inside us that we were not ready to see at the time. Your connection may have taught both of you something that only distance could reveal. And if your paths ever cross again, perhaps the purpose would not be to recreate what existed before. Perhaps it would be to discover whether something healthier can exist now. If this message has reached you during a meaningful season in your life, and you genuinely feel led to support this ministry, there is a donation link in the description and pinned comment. Every contribution, no matter the size, helps us continue creating these messages and sharing encouragement with people who may be silently carrying their own unanswered questions. Please give only what you can comfortably afford. There is no pressure, and if you cannot donate, your support through liking, subscribing, commenting, or sharing this message is already deeply appreciated. And now, take a moment and think about what your soulmate may have realized from that one conversation. They may have realized that time did not erase the connection as completely as they once believed. They may have realized that some feelings can become quieter without becoming meaningless. They may have realized that the past can be understood differently when you finally have enough distance to see it clearly. But most importantly, they may have realized that if there is ever another opportunity, it cannot be about going backward. It has to be about moving forward differently. So do not allow yourself to become consumed by whether they will return or when they might speak. Your responsibility is not to wait beside an imaginary door. Your responsibility is to keep living, growing, healing, and becoming the person you were always meant to become. If they ever come back, let their actions speak louder than the memory of what once was. And if they never do, your growth still matters. Your healing still matters. Your life still matters. Perhaps that conversation reached your soulmate for a reason. Perhaps it simply awakened a question they had buried, but either way, you do not have to force the answer. Sometimes the most powerful second chance begins not when two people reunite, but when both finally understand why the first chapter unfolded the way it did. And if your story ever receives another chapter, let it be written by two people who have grown enough to recognize what they once could not. Not a repetition of the past, not a desperate attempt to recover what was lost, but something honest, peaceful, and new.